Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm delighted to see all of you here this morning. Thank you for coming. We're going to start. I need you to put your hands up in the air. Shake them, give a stretch. Oh, feeling good. Yeah, a little yawning. Triggering that vagus nerve to work for you. Fantastic. And then I want you to slowly lower your hands down and put them pretty close, like within focus range of your face, and take them in, okay? Take them in while I read this. Open your awareness to the hand's journey through time. This was once a fin in the primordial seas where life began, just as it was again in its mother's womb in this lifetime. Countless adventures since then have shaped it. This hand connected with tree and wind as it refined its intelligence. This hand, the ancestors are in it. Ancestors who learned to push up on dry land, to climb, to reach, to grasp. The grasping hands of primates are an adaptation to life in the trees. The common ancestors of all primates evolved an opposable thumb that helped them grasp branches. As the grasping hand evolved, claws disappeared, and today most primates like us instead have flat fingernails and larger fingertip pads, which help them to hold on. From there then to tool making and use, to chip rocks and gather weeds and weave them into baskets, and to gather seeds and harvest them and plant them again, to make fire and carry it banked on the long marches through the ages of ice. It's all in that hand from an unbroken succession of adventures. Similarly, open your awareness to this hand's journey through your particular lifetime. Ever since it came out of your mother's womb, that clever hand that has learned so much, learned to reach for breast or bottle, learned to tie shoelaces, learned to write and draw, learned to wipe tears. You know there are people living now who believe they are worthwhile and lovable because of what your hand has told them. 2, there are people living now who will be healed in mind and body. The power of this hand allows to flow through it. And there are people who are living now whose last touch in life will come from this hand, and they will be able to go into their dying knowing that they are not abandoned. Take a good long look at your hands. They are a history book of where you have been and everything you've touched and worked for. Think of the handshakes you've shared and remember how they felt, some weak, some strong, some soft or rough. Through their hands, you felt some of the other person's character and even the kind of work they've done. Remember how your hands feel when you hold a baby or a person of any age. Your hands are not only strong and capable, but they are filled with love and beauty. Thank you. So we have a visitor. We have 2 visitors, Mikey and Ashley, who are here to tell you about an opportunity for you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us come to your class today. Today, we're going to talk about an opportunity that you can take a hold of in the fall. And before we get into that, we're going to be talking about just a PSA about the new way signage because we work at Penn State Sustainability. We intern there, and they wanted us to come talk to you about this as well. So the university is getting new way signage. You can really only see it in parts of the hub as of right now. But as you can see, it's a lot better. It's color coded compared to the other way signage, and it also has a QR code at the very bottom in which you can scan to get more information. So yeah, those are just some new updates. But now for the reason that we're actually here talking to you today, and that would be about tailgate ambassadors.
Yeah, so as Ashley said, we work at Penn State Sustainability. And if you've ever been to a football game, specifically at the tailgates, you know that like there's a lot of waste that's being produced. So a goal with Penn State Sustainability and our position specifically was to come up with solutions to help combat some of that waste. Um, so we worked on tailgate ambassadors last season. You might have seen us outside of Medler Field. We had like a little tent with a recycling game. So basically, the main goal of Tailgate Ambassadors is to interact with fans, specifically promoting recycling, but also helping with any other kind of needs that they might have. As Ashley said, we are starting to hire for next season, but that we can start you at the blue and white game. We're flexible with that, but yeah, so we're trying to just kind of recruit people. So if you have any interest, the workday listing is right there. It's a paid position, and you could still go to the football games afterwards. It's just during the tailgate, like time period that you would be committing to. We have a couple pictures. So as I said, like you would likely be working at the tent, but then also just kind of roaming the lots, helping out with whatever the recycling initiative is that season. And now, if you have any questions, we could take questions. We also put our emails in the bottom if you want to email us.
Any questions for them? Okay, I'll send that out to you via Canvas message, including the link, the Workday link, and that Workday link goes to the job posting?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you both very much for coming and for the work you're doing in sustainability. Yeah, it's cool. One other announcement that we have, Next Extra Credit movie happening on Wednesday, A Life on Our Planet at 7 o'clock in the Music Building. So jot that down, and I hope that a number of you take this in as an opportunity, get to hang out with Christine and have some conversation. It's going to be fantastic. Such a good showing. So thank you. All right, so this is an expanded version of what we looked at last time, the web of life or the tree of life, beginning down here, the origin of life. So this is like bacteria are way down here. That's going to be important to note. And then everything kind of spurred from there. I understand that you can't see it. The point is that it's so extensive, right? And this is still only a small sort of glimmer of what's out there and all the connections that are being made. But you can see the plant line going off here, the fishes line going here, insects going up through here, and then, you know, as we get up above, then all the mammals. So it's an extensive tree of life. It will be cool if you'll have the opportunity to really open your mind to possibilities and connections over the course of this class period. So in your text, your text this for this week, the reading begins, "Tell me the story of the river and the valley and the streams and the woodlands and wetlands of shellfish and finfish. A story of where we are and how we got here and the characters and roles that we play. Tell me a story that will be my story as well as the story of everyone and everything about me. A story that brings us together under the arc of the great blue sky in the day and the starry heavens at night." A Thomas Berry quote. The story of all of these connections, right? And connection is what it's about. So I mentioned last week the word Umwelt, a German word that means the experience of a particular animal. of a particular species, of a particular being. The story, where does that being get its food? Where does that being find a mate? Where does that being continue and move through the seasons of life? Right? The story that being that carries, the ways of knowing and sensing. So talking about the birds that see in other wavelengths, sensing the world in ways that we can't even imagine because our bodies don't work that way. So the idea that the world is inseparable because of all these different ways of being and living in the world. So imagine a gathering of all species, right? All of these species get together around a campfire. And my proposal is that they're having a conversation to see who's best, right? Who is best? So this is where we were the other day. Are plants the best? After all those characteristics that we talked about last Wednesday, are plants the best? Snagging light at 186,000 miles per second, making the food that begins most of the food chains? It's pretty important. So did anyone have a plant encounter that you'd like to share after last Wednesday's class? Seeing with new eyes, a plant that you saw with new eyes, a tree, perhaps. Any plant stories? Anyone? Okay. So there's still opportunity for that, right? There's still possibility for that. Creating new stories. Thinking about how you experience those flowers at the farmer's market. How you walk by this campus is in itself an arboretum. The hundreds of different species of trees and bushes and plants that you walk by on a daily basis, some of which are only found, they're found, they've been imported from a variety of other places. And so they are here on Penn State's campus to enhance our experience. And so taking those in, looking around, creating relationships with those plants. So are our plants the best? Maybe it's worms. Maybe worms are the best. Worms, really? They might seem gross, but all of their features, like all of nature, has a why. For instance, they're slimy so that the mucus can help them move through the substrate where they move. They slide under the leaves. They move in and around the dirt. They have to be slimy to do the job that they do in the place that they do it. They eat their decomposed stuff, right? So they're eating the dead leaves, they're eating dead bugs, they're eating the soil and getting the nutrients out of it and then pooping out better soil, right? Processed soil that's ready to grow other things. The moisture on the skin helps the worm absorb the oxygen that it needs and expelling the carbon dioxide through its skin. So maybe worms are the best. The soil wouldn't get processed unless we had decomposers like this. So that's pretty important on the planet, playing an essential role. You know, one of the things that they just mentioned here, Mikey and Ashley mentioned, was the compost at Penn State, right? That's such a cool thing that you have the opportunity to do that here on campus. You open up that compost bin and you throw in your banana peels, you throw in your leftover roll after the thing that you ate for lunch. You can throw all those things in there and then it goes to the compost facility and it gets turned back into soil. And then that soil goes all over campus to plant those beautiful flowers and trees that you experience. So it's a direct cycle of those nutrients, which is pretty darn cool. And worms and other decomposers play an important part of that. Otherwise, if you throw your stuff in the trash, throw those banana peels, orange, whatever you've got leftovers, the parts that you can't eat, if you throw that into the trash, it gets bagged up into a plastic trash bag and sent to a landfill where it gets locked up. Those nutrients don't get released. So it's an easy way to do our part of the cycle, composting, right? So compost, creating the nutrients that we need. Maybe worms are the best, but then we have these horseshoe crabs. Maybe horseshoe crabs are the best. Do you know why? Do you know why? It's because they began being horseshoe crabs about 450 million years ago. They're ancient, they're living fossils that are here on our planet. 450 million years ago. Just as a comparison, humans have been around for about 200,000 years. I took my boys to Delaware, to the beach, for a vacation the first week of June, having no idea the awesomeness that we were going to get to experience. We got there, we parked, and the boys jumped out of the car and ran that block to the beach. And there were thousands of horseshoe crabs. It was right at the peak of their mating season. The beach was entirely covered in horseshoe crabs. There were eggs floating in the water. They were lining up on the ocean. The birds were there and they were feasting on it's one of the most amazing natural history sites to be seen, to be witnessed, the horseshoe crab mating season. So horseshoe crabs are arthropods. They're most closely related to spiders and ticks and scorpions, so they're not true crabs. But they are considered living fossils because they've been on this planet in this form for so freaking long. So they must have something going on that we don't, right? Amazing longevity of a species. So maybe they're the best. I don't know. Oh boy. And then there's this, right? Then there's this owls, one of my absolute favorites, right? Eyesight 5 times better than ours, particularly in the dark. Those pupils can open up and allow in all the light by the moonlight and the starlight so they can hunt at night. Their ears are huge compared to the size of their skull, allowing in sound. They have these feathers that help to filter the sound through the feathers and then get caught by the stiff feathers that direct the sound into their ears. Their feathers are extra soft so they can fly so quietly. They can sneak up on their prey. And this owl, the screech owl, can be prey and predator. It's an owl-eat-owl world out there. So they have to be quiet when they're doing their hunting so that they don't get eaten by other things. Owls, quite incredible species. Maybe they're the best. They have so much cool things. The owl knowledge that I'll never understand or know. What about bacteria? Are bacteria the best? Bacteria as a group have a remarkable repertoire of capabilities. They can swim like animals, photosynthesize like plants, and decompose dead organic matter like fungi. Bacteria have pioneered into existence all of life's essential metabolic processes: photosynthesis, oxygen breathing, fermentation, nitrogen fixation, and now biologists estimate that Earth may house as many as 1 trillion species of bacteria. Bacteria are maintaining this vast global network of supporting us, supporting the earth, supporting all of these different ways of being that we don't really even think about. They set the conditions for the living on this planet. And actually, right now, bacteria by the millions are all around you. All around you. They're on your phone, your water bottle, your hands before you wash them and after you wash them. Bacteria inhabit the outside surfaces of your body and the inside surfaces of your body. Hundreds of thousands of them per square inch on your legs and arms, your core, your face. How do you feel about bacteria? Talk to your neighbor. The heat doesn't help. And then people sit there like with their jackets on, I'm like dying.
I would be dying.
Okay. Who wants to talk about bacteria? I'd love to hear a couple of thoughts about bacteria. Where are the microphones? Thanks. There's somebody right here who's waiting. Yep. Thank you.
I guess I feel pretty like indifferent about bacteria. I think sometimes it has like a negative connotation, like it's like gross, like bacteria, ew. But I kind of have to think about like, what am I gonna do about it? I mean, it's all over me and it helps me function. And I don't know, it's kind of cool to think about like there's these like millions and millions of these tiny little things all over you and they just do their thing.
And help you do your things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
I feel like there's so many different like types of bacteria and some are good and some are bad. So it reminds me that like not everything's one-sided and then there's good and bad in everything.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Anyone else? Your inner ecosystem is full of bacteria. Not only is the multitude out there, but in your body, bacteria outnumber your own cells 10 to 1. Your body, my body, is a swirling, pulsating ecosystem, wild assortment of creatures living in and on. Here's one example. This is an electron microscope image, of course, with different dyes on different types of bacteria. There are an estimated 300 different species of bacteria living inside our mouths. A microscopy expert took this swabs from inside his mouth and placed them under the scanning electron microscope to reveal these as pictured. Some bacteria can cause gum disease and tooth decay, and yet other bacteria are helpful. So not good or bad, just there in their variety. His research showed that some species are adapted to the environment at the tip of the tongue, some prefer the back of the tongue, others inhabit our cheek pouches, and yet others feed on the plaque on our teeth. And this even only scratches the surface. If you were to really break it down, 20 billion organisms in the mouth, 500 species, 1 billion per centimeter on your skin, and on and on. So sometimes we are conditioned to see bacteria as enemies, right? So you might consider what your relationship with your body and your bacteria are, because it's important to understand that these bacteria affect us in pretty dramatic ways. It has been shown that studies provide evidence that the composition of our gut microbiota, so the biome, what's living inside of us, it influences our level of contentment. Most of all, our serotonin and much of our dopamine, neurotransmitters that we've already talked about, right? That feelings of pleasure and well-being are produced by microbes inside of our guts. And so by regulating the production of these microbes, they can regulate our neurotransmitters. So this is another case of you are what you eat, right? If you're filling your body with not so healthy things and feeding that to your gut biome, then your gut biome is going to react by not producing all of those happy hormones that you need. If you're eating a balanced diet of all the things that help you to be healthy, those vegetables and fruits and beans and fiber and all that stuff, then it's going to be good for your gut and therefore for the bacteria that live inside. So researchers did some switching in mice. They took the gut biome of quiet, shy, timid mice and the outgoing, gregarious, fun, playful mice, and they swapped their gut biomes. And what happened was that the mouse, they started to act differently. Right? They started to act more like what the gut biome said of the previous mouse. They switched personalities. So understanding that those are just mice, and yet our bacteria, we carry some of the same, our genetics are very similar. And so thinking about how to be healthy includes thinking about the power of our bacteria, right? How it can help us. There is no solitary, free living creature. Every form of life is dependent on other forms. The assessments of superiority and inferiority based on these arbitrary criteria, it's pretty much useless. Okay? Determining who's best doesn't particularly work because we all the species have interesting things, have capabilities, have sensitivities. So it's really the totality of all the species that creates life on Earth as we know it. This vast range of life strategies of all of these creatures together. So we are not separate from, we are just one of this big community. We are dependent on others inside and out. So Umwelt, thinking about how all these species experience the world differently. So when you see those squirrels running around on campus, you can wonder about what their experience, their life experience is like. What is it that they are afraid of? What is it that they are seeing that we are not seeing? How do they find the food that they need? What are their communities like? How do they interact with each other? And you could do the same for the robins that have been gathering on campus, the crows that have been gathering on campus, the red-tailed hawks that are flying around campus every day. So exciting to think. So we can talk about then the sensitivities of these things, the sensitivities, the awarenesses. What does a squirrel need to do to survive? What does it need to pay attention to? What kind of ways can you be curious about and understand the squirrel's experience a little bit more? So what we're talking about here, last week we did tree and plant intelligence. Today, horseshoe crab intelligence, worm intelligence, bacteria intelligence, owl intelligence. But it's just really that all of those groups are sensitive and aware in different ways. How do they flourish? How do they flourish? Flourishing depends much more than IQ. There are, 300 people in this room with so many different ways of approaching life, ways of flourishing, ways of finding what you need in the world, because we're all different. We all have these different needs, and yet we're all the same. It's such a cool thing to think about. How are we meeting those needs? No matter what our IQ is, or the emotional, social, intuitive intelligences, how do we develop these communities so that we have each other, so that we can thrive as individuals and as groups? So living beings, they know their world. They understand their world. Human is a word that has its origin in humus, or soil, humus. The humus of the earth, the soil, directly relates to the word human. We have our roots in the same soil of all of these animals. And we all have our own sensitivities. Think about things that you might be good at, that you have friends that are not so good at, or people. Like I enjoy music, but I don't play music. And I highly enjoy when people play and give their gift, their sensitivities. So you might have sensitivities like that, or to rhythms, or to colors, or to number patterns, or to bird song. You might have healing powers of touch, emotional nuances you can read in people, right? Your intuition. You might be able to read lips. You might be able to sense subtle energy shifts. You might be really good at nonverbal communication. So it's all of these sensitivities, right, that make us as individuals so freaking cool. But then it also makes all of those other species so freaking cool, right? So what we are talking about here is speciesism, particularly. The idea that being human, speciesism, is the belief that being human is a good enough reason for humans to have greater moral rights than non-human animals. So the idea of superiority, racism, when a race is less than another race. Sexism, when one sex is less than another. It's separation, right? It causes separation when we look at the world like this. Communism, socialism, political beliefs that determine who is entitled to what. This is a story of separation. So speciesism, the idea that other animals don't matter as much as we do, separates us from relationship. So some people argue that speciesism or racism or sexism is natural, like it's biologically natural to treat things like you, people like you, the same, and then everything else different. Except, and that's true with animals, except that we have the power to choose, right? We have the power to choose where we put our compassion and connection. So equality, thinking about equality. This goes back to our biases that we've talked about, right? So thinking about, there's the definition of speciesism. Non-human animals are not human. Their interest in our lives matters less than our interest in our lives, excuse me. So what I'm asking you is to consider respect, right? And attempts at understanding, putting yourself in their place, whoever they are, whether it's another species, whether it's another person, putting yourself in their place and understanding and respecting. So we go from this, from ego to eco, where things are more equal. Ego is the conscious part of our personality that interacts with the world, the part of the mind that plans and remembers and evaluates the self or the I, that's the ego. So then the ism, right? Ism separating. So what we're trying to get past is that separation. All species, all beings, all people are part of the great whole. Everything is interconnected and interrelated, and all have important parts to play in the ecosystem with all of our unique sensitivities. So consider this for a moment. And our ego plays into all of the things that we do. So how do you feel about this? And then if you feel like you have rights, to put yourself before others, other people or other species, really dive into that for a moment of reflection. Take a quiet moment, and then when you're ready, talk to your neighbor. Anybody want to speak to this? There's someone up here in the front, wherever the microphones are. Thank you.
Hi, Jen. I had a question for you actually, because you are explaining how we have the choice to put ourselves in order of like who's most important, but you also use the phrase just mice earlier when relating to like testing. So what's your opinion on that?
I think that that's how we think of them, right? They're just mice. That's just such a common, like we have labs full of them. They are just mice getting used in the way for all kinds of research.
In middle school, one of my teachers had a snake, and every month she would feed it mice. And I was in the class, and I had to leave. I couldn't watch it. And I actually bought the mouse off of her so that she wouldn't feed it to the snake. And then she let me keep it in the classroom, and then I took care of it for like 2 years until he passed away.
2 years is good for a mouse. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just about perspective. Thank you for sharing your story, right? Are they just mice? Like, how are those choices made? What are the benefits and disadvantages for choosing, right, those mice? They can teach us a lot, and they have taught us a lot. And so there's a reason that they are chosen for that role. But it is important to consider, right? So thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay. So going back to something that looks familiar, right? Those word pairs for you to consider. Sometimes we default to something in our heads, right, about superior and inferior. Yeah, it's just important for consideration. So how are we going to be beings in this ecosystem? How are we going to engage in the way that feels right? So Alexander von Humboldt, 18th century scientist and explorer, world famous in his time, was the first to explain the fundamental functions of the forest for the ecosystem and the climate, claiming that the world is a single interconnected organism. This is the concept of nature as we now know it. According to von Humboldt, everything from the smallest creature to the largest, from the smallest plant to the largest, has its role, and together all make up the experience that we know. And humankind is just one part of that. So how might you enact this in your lives, right? How might you go out into the world and take this in? How can you jumpstart your curiosity about connection? Could be when you go to different cultural events. I just saw that there's a very cool bison bead making project that's coming as part of an exhibit at the Hub, celebrating the history of the bison in this country, right? Making 31,000 beads to represent those bison. And so how can you go to that and take that in and understand that bison are a very important part of the ecosystem, and even were more so in the past? So how can you go to those cultural events, to those musical events, to those parks, and take in the world around you and open up and make your connections and curiosity work for you? Right? Does anybody have a story of a connection that you've had in nature? Nature being this vast thing that we think about. An unusual or exciting connection in nature, something that you thought was pretty touching at the time? Maybe at the beach, maybe in the mountains, maybe when you were out hunting with your pap. Hi, Maddie. Thank you. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so in my hometown, there's a tree like deep, deep, deep in the forest that was planted during the Civil War.
Wow.
So it's like massive, and it's so large that the branches and roots go all the way into the ground and have replanted themselves as new trees, bursting out throughout it.
Uh-huh.
I could be wrong on this. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that planted it, and like you would never be able to see it unless you take a certain path or go a certain way. It's near King of Prussia,
Okay.
near Oaks Town Center or the shopping center there.
Is it
If
an
you,
oak? Is it an oak tree?
I'm not positive. I should know. I have a picture of it, but
Okay.
it's huge and it wraps around and everything is there. So for me, like, I'm interested to like know like how many people even know about it. We found it because we were doing a gender reveal. So for our family friends, my sister and I, we do like media stuff. So we like edit videos and take videos, stuff like that. But it just makes me think like how many people even know where that is and how many people have truly seen it.
Yeah,
So like I guess that's a connection that I've made.
that's beautiful. Will you send me a picture? Yeah. Thank you. I'd love to see it. Share it. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Maddie.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
So a few years ago, me and my family went to Nassau, Bahamas over in Atlantis, and I've never looked at a sunset on the beach before. So I decided to wake up extra early that morning and go by myself on the beach, and looking at the sunrise was like unreal with my toes in the sand and just hearing the water, not a single soul on the beach other than me. It was just an amazing experience. I can't even explain it.
Beautiful moments, seeing and accepting and being. There's one up toward the back there. Oh, great. Thank you. Katie, would you head up that way?
My parents love to go on hikes, and they always like drag me with them. But I've like kind of learned to appreciate going on hikes with them and spending time together in nature. I remember one time we were on a hike. It was just kind of like normal, like forest kind of stuff. And then there was a break in the trees, and we go on this trail, and there's just a giant sunflower field. And I had never really seen like a sunflower field before, so it was very beautiful and very like large, and it was just kind of awesome to see all of the sunflowers in bloom. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Stunning. Yeah.
Hey, Jen.
Hi.
So before coming to college, my family took a trip and I got to go snorkeling in Belize. And I didn't know the Belize Barrier Reef is the second biggest in the world. So when I was there, I kind of like got separated a little bit from the group. And I was kind of by myself, and I saw this one stingray that was swimming around. And I just was like so drawn to it because I love stingrays. Like, I think they're so cool. And I was just kind of thinking, like, how many people have seen this stingray? Or, like, am I the only one in this group that's going to see this stingray today? And it was just like a really neat experience. And then I got to swim with sharks, and it was like facing my biggest fear. But now I have such a cool appreciation for them. Like, that whole day changed my view of the ocean and all the creatures that live inside of it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So all of this is, as always, for your consideration, right? For you to figure out what to do with for you. Your Canvas discussion reflection prompt: the more of the world I am in relationship, the more alive I become. I'll be posting it later today. Thank you very much. I hope that you have a beautiful day.